Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, I've told them a little bit about you, but it might be an idea, John, if you just quickly tell us a little bit about how you came to where you are and how Ian fits in the picture and how you came to be doing presentations like this on YouTube.
Okay. Well, I guess it all started off with the COVID episode where when these restrictions started to come in, they're saying you had to wear a mask, you couldn't go here or there, and so on. I started looking around for some people that I could associate with who, might feel the same way I did. So I went down to the local foreshore where I thought there might be a stand in the park or some group like that. Eventually, I met a group there that was organised under the aegis of Monica Smith, Reignite Democracy. And I met a few people there. I ran into some people there who were from Australia One. And I also ran into some people, the couple who were running that organised a big meeting. They had about 300 people there. Um, while I was there, I got invited to another group that met on the Perth foreshore on a Monday evening. This group, when I went along to see, were talking about Article 61 of Magna Carta. And I'll be honest with you, when I first met them, I thought, oh, are these people all there? It just seemed so strange what they were saying. And really, I'll do this by following on with the next. Let's get rid of this a little bit here. Yeah, I want to get that out of the way. Um, let's go on with this one here. I want to go on to this particular. So this is a particularly important point here. We'll come back to this. These people were talking about this Article 61 that had been invoked and that had rendered obsolete or invalid all the existing laws and statutes. I thought, well, how can that be? Um, I thought, well, that sounded outrageous or outlandish. And I thought, well, but I need to find out whether that's true or not. What if it's true? So that was where I started sort of looking. Now we'll go back a little bit and start here. That I started looking into Article 61 and found out more about it. And I became convinced, yeah, this is actually what's happened. This is a situation that exists at the moment. So I start with these couple of points here to people to set aside the perceptions of me as a presenter. This includes things like how I look, dress, or sound, because these are trivialities and they could detract from the mental focus on the information that's being presented. It's the information that's important, not me personally. And be consciously aware of any impulses you may have to reject information provided in this seminar solely based on an initial emotional response to the information. It's a logical fallacy to gauge the veracity of any information based upon how you feel when first seeing or hearing it. So I've just described how I felt when I first heard about Article 61. And I nearly didn't look into it because of those, skeptical feelings that I had. I'm glad that I did, because the more I looked into it, the more I discovered that it's all verifiable. So it comes down to a question of how teachable are we, and that can be dependent upon the open-mindedness or closed-mindedness of the individual being taught. Low teachability could derive from arrogance or rigid skepticism, but also from naivete and gullibility. The high teachability derives from a balance between healthy skepticism and an open-minded willingness to learn and change. This is a point that I mentioned earlier. It's not what we don't know that makes us ignorant. It's what we don't want to know. So there are a lot of people, for example, who say, well, I'm not really interested in philosophical questions and things like I'm not really interested in philosophy, but that is actually a philosophical viewpoint in itself. They tend to not realize that when they're making such remarks. Um, we all do have certain types of philosophy, whether we acknowledge it or not. Um, and people will say, for example, that they want certain conditions to be present for both themselves and their species as a whole, such as happiness, health, peace, freedom, prosperity, etc. But that specific requirements exist in order for human beings to obtain those conditions. If the requirements for obtaining those conditions are not met, these conditions do not just manifest automatically by magical means. If we do not already have the things we say we want, it follows logically that the knowledge of the requirements to obtaining the things they say they want must either be absent, or if present, that knowledge must be willfully being ignored. As long as this knowledge continues to remain unknown or ignored, the manifestation of the desired conditions will be impossible. So what I'm going to be doing here is running through three sections in this presentation. The first one we're just talking about here is basically acknowledging what is real, what we can actually observe around ourselves. In other words, what we might call the natural world, the natural order of things. These type of statements that I've just been reading apply to that. If we want a certain thing, if we want bread, for example, and there isn't a bakery shop, we have to find out how do you get bread? How do you make bread? You've got to get the ingredients. You've got to learn how to grow the ingredients, and there's a process of preparing them and so on. Unless you do all those things, you're not going to have any bread. So it's the same thing with politics or with anything else that we're looking. If we want to be wealthy, we've got to produce more than we consume, so that there's some surplus left over. All of these are just natural laws that we can observe. Unfortunately, there's a lot of what we call occult or hidden knowledge. Occult simply means hidden, and there are groups of people who know certain things about how the world works and how human nature works, and they don't make that knowledge known to everybody. Not everyone is interested in finding out that, but the people that do know it like to keep it hidden. And the reason they do that is because uh, it gives us a knowledge of human consciousness, how it operates, knowledge of natural law, unseen spiritual laws which govern the consequences of human behavior. And keeping that secret is deliberately hidden in order to create and maintain a power differential between those who hold that information and those who are ignorant of it. So obviously, if you've got a group of people that understand how human nature works and how to manipulate people, they and other groups don't have that knowledge. There's a power differential there, and the people who know about it are able to exercise influence, which the people who are being influenced might not even be aware that that's happening. And that's certainly something that's happening today. So the knowledge of natural law and its operations constitutes the most deeply occulted information on Earth. And the people that control this and know about this are keeping it hidden as much as possible, because if it was understood by the general population, it would level the playing field and put an end to the currently entrenched systems of control. Just as an example, and we will be taking breaks during here. So if people have questions, they can either write them down. We'll come to a point in about another 10 or 15 minutes where we stop and take questions about this episode here about natural law. So we're happy to sort of answer questions about those type of things. But we can see one of these things happening at the moment. A week or so ago, there was a piece on the ABC on Four Corners about sovereign citizens, for example, and that program was absolutely full of red flags. There was hardly anybody on there that knew anything about the laws that actually exist, or as the natural law should exist. And then we just had a few days ago this tragic incident with a couple of police being allegedly shot by a guy who is claimed to be a sovereign citizen. So these type of, and then they're putting out these, all the media's all full of this. People who are, sovereign citizens are dangerous. They don't believe in the law and that sort of thing. So this is one of those attempts at manipulation where people who don't look deeply into it will be easily persuaded by this type of propaganda that anyone who disagrees with anything the government is doing is a potentially dangerous terrorist. So this is just one example of the type of manipulation that's been going on for a long time. It leads into this question here of nescience versus ignorance. Nescience is a Latin word. It comes from nesciere, to not know because knowledge was absent or unattainable. Ignorance comes from the Latin verb ignorare, to not know, even though necessary information is present, because that information has been willfully refused or disregarded. And on many subjects, people would fall into both of these categories on something. There are many things that we would like to know. For example, how did the universe begin? That's something that we don't know because the knowledge isn't attainable. People might have various beliefs about it, but there's no actual knowledge about it. On the other hand, there are things like, let's give it a simple example, the law of gravity. If everybody knows about the law of gravity, or some people argue that it doesn't exist, but if they try to ignore the effect of it by jumping off a high building, they'll find out that it does operate, and they'll pay the penalty because they've willfully ignored that information that's available. So there's a difference in those two things. So the main steps to problem solving is realizing there is a problem, and fear-based denial of the problem must be first dealt with and conquered. And we therefore need to diagnose the cause of the problem. So at the moment, we've got a situation where people are very unhappy with the way the government is functioning, the way that the country is going, lots of the policies that are in place, the fact that we pay huge amounts of our money in taxes and fees and fines and this type of thing. We can be fined for doing things that don't affect anybody else in any harmful way whatsoever. And these type of things cause distress and angst in the community and to individuals. So we need to know what is the cause of these things. Now, we're looking here. We need to discern what are the principles. A principle is a fundamental truth or proposition. It serves as a foundation for a systemic behavior or a chain of reasoning. The etymology, the origin of the word is from the Latin princeps, or princip, meaning first or chief. So a principle is something that forms a basis of a chain of thought. We're looking here at this point, we're discussing natural law. So what is the law? What are the laws that occur in nature? And this is a picture here of Baruch Spinoza. Spinoza was a Dutch philosopher. He lived in the 17th century, and he was a Jew by birth, but he was one of the first great modern philosophers who came to understand that we really need to learn about nature if we really want to be able to find out what's the appropriate way to live in this world. We need to understand how it works. This is one of his statements: the highest activity a human being can attain is learning for understanding, because to understand is to be free. Now, Spinoza, although he was born a Jew, because of the free thinking that he engaged in, he ended up being excommunicated from both the Jewish community and the Catholic and the religious community, the Christian community. Neither of them wanted anything to do with him because his ideas were so modern and challenged people's existing modes of thought. But a lot of his ideas have come down through the ages since then and influenced many other philosophers, people like Descartes, Voltaire, John Locke, the English John Locke, the one with the E on his name. These type of people are influenced by Spinoza's thinking, and he wasn't the only one in that school of philosophers. There were others as well. That touches on a different subject that we won't cover in this particular presentation. So that's basically how I'd like to stop it. We'll just look at this little bit here. This is just some basic logic that we can derive from the question of principle. People want freedom to make decisions that affect themselves, don't like being bullied or coerced. This requires a community in which everyone recognizes each other's needs and the right to the free will and the right for all to exercise their free will. The community must realize the universe's own objective requirements for morality, specifically that knowingly exercising your free will in such a way that it encroaches on someone else's ability to do the same causes you to commit a crime under natural law. When we look at nature, we see that every living entity, whether it's a plant, an animal, or a human, comes into existence with one inalienable right, that is to try to sustain its own existence. And if it's of a certain class of being, it may also have the ability to improve its circumstances. For example, in the animal kingdom, we have things like birds and beavers and nest building creatures. They're not born with a nest around them, but their instinct, they're able to learn that. Some are taught by their parents, but mostly it's an instinct. They learn how to do this and improve their situation by constructing a safe haven for themselves and for their offspring. With humans, we have many, many choices open to us because we have the ability to think. When we use this ability and decide what we want to do, then we come to this question about, are we exercising our free will in such a way that it encroaches on someone else's ability to do the same? If we are, then we're committing a crime under natural law. To act in such a way that improves or prolongs our existence is a right thing to do, because that's right as defined by the universe, right? That we were born in that way. But if we use that freedom to prevent other people from also using their freedom, then that's wrong behavior. So this is where the origin of rights comes from. What is right according to nature? Committing a crime under natural law has consequences for us that return back to us through the natural unfolding of events or the organic playing out of dynamics within the universe. This is the returning back to us or mirroring of our stuff. So that's the basis of natural law. And a community recognizing this functions under the ideology of individualism, recognizes individual rights. It's fundamentally non-collectivist. Collectivism is dangerous because it is groupthink. We've been led or programmed to accept or believe concepts like for the greater good, or the needs of the majority must always override the minority. This is dangerous and fundamentally anti-universe. And if you find ourselves using these phrases, we've been tricked or misled. We have to constantly watch that we don't get sucked into things like that where we think, yeah, well, that sounds like a good idea. But then when you think about it, if we follow that line of thought and translate that into action, are we actually infringing upon other people on their free will and their rights? This one here, number 7, voting in elections is violence on the minority or individual. If your opinion matches the majority, you're expecting what you want will override all other opinions through brute force of numbers. The problem with that is what the majority wants isn't necessarily correct. And the universe fundamentally doesn't operate like that because it would be the will of the majority denying the free will of the minority or even the individual, which the universe provides for everybody. So this is the last point before we have a little break here for some questions. The English Constitution, is it compatible with everything described above? Yes, because all it does is defend the people against an administration becoming something more, a government. Under a common law constitution, the government isn't really a government at all. Why? Because under common law constitution, it's the people that do the governing of themselves, not the officers or officials. The government is nothing more than an administration executing the wishes of the people. This seems anarchic, but it's actually the most orderly method. So I think that's a good point to have a break here. And I'll stop sharing for a second so we can see each other again. Does anybody have any questions about what we've covered so far?
We've got the lights off here because
Okay.
it's good to see you on the screen. So Jenny's going to turn it on.
All right.
So
yeah, we'll go back to. I mean, there's more presentation.
no,
but we
hang
wanted to
on.
have
That's all right. The lights are on.
Yep.
I'll turn you around so you can see the morose look on
Okay.
everybody's face.
So you're all prepared for
All right.
when your time runs out and you'll dial in again?
Yes.
Yeah.
John, did you notice that there was a message on the screen to tell us that we had 10 minutes to go?
I didn't see that, no, but so
Yeah.
when it cuts off, we'll just go back to the link and come in again.
Okay, so 8 minutes and 37 seconds. So
Okay.
does anybody have a question for John?
Any questions? We wanted to make sure that we weren't sort of running ahead and leaving unanswered questions in people's mind, because we're going to move on to the question of the English Constitution and Magna Carta, the type of the law that we operate under. We technically operate under that law in Australia. So before we go into that, we just wanted to make sure anybody had any questions about these ideas of the natural law. Anybody got any queries about that at all?
Some of that, John, looks like Mark Passio's work. He's put out some good stuff on natural law, hasn't he?
That's right. He's some of those slides, those early slides were Mark Passio. He's given permission for anybody to use those, and the slides that I use in my PowerPoint, anyone could use those as well. They're freely available to anybody, and if they, of course, if they can make any better ones, all well and good. So the question about the natural law is that it's fairly simple to get people to agree to these ideas that, well, yeah, of course, say there's two people and they have a disagreement about something. Does one of them have any innate right to overrule the other one and coerce them into their point of view? The answer to that is no. If you had 5 people in a room and they were discussing something, 3 of them wanted one course of action and the other 2 disagreed, do the 3 have the right to overrule and coerce the 2, being the minority, to act according to their will and dictates? And again, the answer is no. No one is born with that innate authority. They're all born equal with one life, which is our job and responsibility to try to maintain and, if possible, improve. And of course, if we have families, well, our responsibility is to look after them as well. So it doesn't matter how many people are introduced into the equation. Obviously, in modern society, we've got millions of people. The principle is still the same, that a group doesn't have any authority, any innate legitimate authority because it's larger than another group to dictate what that other group should or shouldn't do. That's the point that we're making in this first section. Does anybody else have any questions about what we've discussed so far?
I'd also throw in the comment that a lot of the mainstream media is pushing, it's bad for our democracy and everything's about the democracy, trying to train the populace that democracy is the way that it ought to be. But of course, we're a constitutional monarchy and, the US is a constitutional republic. They aren't democracies. So that's more misinformation, disinformation from the mainstream.
Yeah, good point. That's because we'll be coming back to that a little bit later on. That's definitely the case. Democracy even has been defined wrongly, as you've expressed it there, which is what we're told. Democracy, that's a wrong definition, and it's part of the conditioning that we've all been subjected to. Not just us, but for generations before as well. Hundreds of years of conditioning of this type of thinking. Let's.
There's a saying: a lynch mob is a democracy with a dissenting vote of one.
Excuse me.
Bruce, have you got any questions?
I would point out that there's a thing to go on. Somebody else got a question?
Yeah, hang on, John. Hang on. I'll put my phone to the laptop so John can hear it. Just ask the question.
I just said it's more like a theory or a thought, because it sounds like a lot of this natural law stuff that John's talking about aligns with metaphysics and cosmological law. And are they not almost one and the same or aligned with each other at the minimum?
Did you get that?
Well, you can. Yeah, that's getting into a different question from what we're talking about here, but it's a good question, and there is a lot of evidence, of course, that these things are aligned. If what I was talking about with natural law, about how human beings behave when they relate with each other, and there was a statement there just near the end of that section about if we do something wrong to another person, that tends to come back to us through the natural workings of the order of things. If you do wrong to people, it can cause resentment. They might take certain reactions to that. And if enough people are doing wrong things, you wind up with a chaotic type of society where there's lots of strife. And so in a sense, yeah, you could say that's metaphysical because it's not written down anywhere, but we can observe it. And so it's a very good question. I think all of these things, I was reminded of the saying, every truth or all truth can be subsumed into one great whole. That's a whole with a W. So these things, all truths tend to relate to each other. When you get enough of them, you see how they connect up. But yes, I would say you've got, it's a metaphysical type of thing. If we mistreat people, it tends to come back to us. If it doesn't come back to us personally, it might come back to our families or our descendants. These things, you can't completely evade natural law, or you can't get away from natural law. So, for example, we'll be talking later on about how natural law, that the English Constitution that technically abides over the entire British Commonwealth, has been corrupted, and but that can't carry on indefinitely. There's an answer to that, but if people ignore it or pretend that the problem isn't there or that the solution isn't there, then the problem will persist. You can call that a metaphysical argument, if you like, but it nevertheless manifests in reality. So does that answer your question? Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess it does. They're in line with each other, I believe, though, because when I mean metaphysical, I mean the cosmological laws of the universe. And that's sort of what you're talking about. So it seems to me like it does actually all balance out. But, and that was kind of what my question was. So, yeah, you do that. That does answer my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Okay.
There's less than 1 minute to go. So,
All right, might be a good time to take a break for a couple of minutes, maybe brew a cuppa if somebody wants a cuppa.
okay.
I'm going to make sure mine doesn't run out because I've got a tickly throat. So when we come back, we'll go on and talk about the development of the English Constitution and then how that's been